So again, y'all, I just want to welcome you to this conversation today, Stories from the Field, Small Farms, and GAP's Audits. My name is Billy Mitchell, and I work for the National Farmers Union. And you might be asking yourself, what's the National Farmers Union? National Farmers Union is a grassroots, producer-driven organization that believes strong agriculture is the basis for thriving communities. Within the National Farmers Union, I work for a group called the Local Food Safety Collaborative, and it's a cooperative agreement between the National Farmers Union Foundation and the FDA, and we provide outreach, education, and training to small fruit and vegetable growers and processors on the Food Safety Modernization Act, otherwise known as FSMA. And we're lucky to have a network of partners across the country working to implement food safety projects and expand reach. And today we get to work with a bunch of those partners. One I just met a couple of minutes ago, and a couple I've known for a couple of years now, thanks to the joy and beauty of produce safety. The first speaker will be Kim Butz from the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, a former farmer turned produce safety educator. Then Nathan Vannette from Growing Green Family Farms in South Carolina. Roberto Meza from Emerald Garden Microgreens. And then plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And y'all, that question and answer period, it's only as good as you make it. So please be generous with your questions, your answers, and your thanks for our presenters. Something that we've just heard a lot over the past couple of years is produce safety educators really want to know what motivates a small farmer to get a GAP audit, a good agricultural practices audit, and what benefits has come to that farmer by doing it. And so today we're going to hear a bunch of those different experiences. And originally we were going to start with Kim Butz, but we were having a little technical difficulties. So Kim, first question is, have you been able to rejoin us?
I have.
Very cool. So the next question is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is the moment of truth. Oh, it's so good to see some of y'all's faces. I love the full screen view.
Look at everybody out there.
Hey, y'all. From all over the country. Kim, are you able to share your screen?
Well, let's see if it works this time.
Okay. And I should tell everybody, you saw on that agenda, these folks only have about 10 minutes to talk. And so I asked them to pretend that these were the good old days when we'd run into each other at a farmer conference, like in the hallway. And because I love produce safety, I really would run into Kim Butz and say, Kim, we've only got 10 minutes. Talk to me about good agricultural practices. But when those 10 minutes are up, I'm gonna be like, Kim, we gotta go. I really wanna see Nathan's talk. And then we're gonna leave a lot of time at the end for Q&A from the audience.
Great. You know what, Billy, I hate to say it, but it's absolutely not here. So I sent it over to Trisha. Trisha, did you get it? It's a Google slide.
This makes me miss our old technical difficulties of being in person.
Give me 1 moment.
Where people would be like, do you know how to turn on the projector? And like, oh gosh, we'll do our best. And like the microphones don't work. There's one AV guy at the Georgia Organics Conference just running in circles as all the microphones break.
You have it, Trisha?
I have not gotten the email, no.
I'm sharing the presentation. Bill, you want to move on to the next and I'll work on this? I apologize.
Oh, all good. Nathan, we're going to put you on the spot. Are you ready to go first instead of second?
Sure. I'll give it a try.
All right, very cool. And Nathan, I'll put our new friendship to the test, and about 10 minutes in, I'll let you know that we've hit our marker.
Perfect, sounds great. Okay, my name is Nathan Vannette from Growing Green Family Farms, where we focus on sustainable, nourishing, and local produce. We grow all of our produce without the use of any pesticides or herbicides. And so we really have a unique niche market, especially with the broadness of vegetables that we grow. Everything from your root crops to your leafy greens. We do some microgreens, but then we also do tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. And one thing that was interesting is with COVID, 80% of our sales were direct to restaurants. And when COVID hit, the bottom dropped off of that. So we had to scramble around and find different ways to market our produce. At this point, we were not certified GAP, but we were looking for other options to open up doors that would possibly enable us to reach other markets. And that's where we really saw GAP as a unique opportunity to expand our outlet, while also providing assurance to our customers of the quality and safety of the produce that we were growing. So our initial worry with the obtaining of GAP was paperwork, just a lot of unknown. Like, what does it take? I know there's a lot of paperwork entailed, and especially since we are a small farm, we have two farms. One is about 1 acre in size, and then we have a half-acre urban farm. And we wanted to first focus on getting that half-acre urban farm, because that is the heart of our business, where we're delivering right from the West Greenville area over to the downtown Greenville restaurant, literally 5 minutes from our doors. So we were really wanting to use this opportunity to get GAP certified so that we could be able to have assurance with what we were doing was providing safe produce for them. But then it also, there were some wholesale distributors and one particular customer who asked for the certification. And that was finally what did it for us, with biting the bullet and deciding to go that next step. So we reached out to the CFSA. Kim was so very thankful, or we were so very thankful for her ability to come out and just help us along the way. She came and told us what we needed to do. We built our food safety plan, and just leading up to the audit, we had a lot more confidence moving forward as we progress towards this opportunity. So really, a lot of it came down to just maintaining. We were already having a very clean environment, but it was the paperwork, getting a sense of the record. And once we got into a good rhythm with that, we had great assurance that in that day with the audit team, we would be ready to go. So today, we're thankful that we passed with 100% on our GAP certification. We could not have done this without him. It was absolutely amazing being able to walk each step of the way. And it's amazing what we can do today can really open doors for the future. So today, that's enabled us to start working with contracts with different organizations regionally. Like we're working with Grow Foods, and then also different wholesale distributors, which has really enabled us in a time of uncertainty, especially with restaurants, to be able to know that 100% of the produce that we're growing has a home somewhere. The last thing we want to do as a farmer is to see our hard work and effort go into being wasted. So we're starting to also be able to just market it some more. And that's been really neat to see, even though we're small, it has set us apart. Even at the farmers market, sharing our story of, hey, what is good agricultural practices? It was definitely a jump, especially since we are not large, but at the same time, since we have visions to expand, we wanted to start small and get the procedures, our standard operating procedures, and all the documentation well done, so that as we expand, it's much easier to incorporate that. And we're just really excited to see how it's enabled us to mitigate potential risks and assess different areas of our business structure to better grow specifically to the customer's needs, and have rest assurance on our part that we're doing what we can to have good agricultural practices, making sure that we're delivering a food product, both of which we're proud of, but we know is safe for the consumer to consume. And this can be everything from direct to consumer. We deal with a lot of CSA customers, people at the farmers markets, restaurants, but then even as we're starting to work with more institutions, with locally, that would be like the Greenville Culinary Institute, of which required this certification. And just that peace of mind, while yet also enabling us to reach other markets during a time of uncertainty, has been pivotal for us. It has enabled us to, from just prior to COVID, over double the size of our business. And it's opened up so many doors, and many more doors of which we look forward to looking toward. And that's the biggest thing, is we want to continue to gear ourselves and where we're at for the future. So keeping in mind what we can do today that was very pivotal with that particular system. And it's been just really neat to work through with our employees to share and then be able to increase that through different research projects, whether it's with University or GA, to continue to further the education of good agricultural practices, while also inspiring local farmers around to do likewise. So it's been amazing just to continue to go on this journey. And
No, Nathan, sorry, it's Billy. I'm not going to cut you off yet. I think your microphone might have come out of the jack. We heard a little
Uh-oh.
scratchiness, and now it sounds like you're farther away than you were.
Ooh, let me see if I can fix that. Oh, there you go.
All good. Otherwise, you're gonna have to
Jack-
start like yelling at us. Oh, go
Uh-oh.
ahead.
Is this any better?
I think it's good. I think we can work with it. It's good. We can hear you.
Okay, sounds good. So here today, with COVID, there's still a lot of uncertainty. The retail market and wholesale market are still trying what the new normal is going to be. But having GAP, especially being a small farm, it's hard to keep with larger organizations. But this has opened up an opportunity for us to help level out that playing field a little bit more. And it's definitely been pivotal with different businesses opening up. And it seems like the trend is definitely more good agricultural practices being required regardless of the size of the organization. So with that vantage point, it was also just enabling us to be prepared for whatever is coming down the pipe. And we've been very thankful for the opportunity to participate with this GAP and see how through just some of their guidance, we've been able to really pivot our organization and continue to propel ourselves forward. And it's been incredible to see how that has impacted the lives of people in our community. We went from just being a family-run and owned organization to now we have 6 employees outside the household. And just to see how we can interact with them and have an impact on their portion of that journey. A lot of these people are conscious and to go through and be like, hey, this is good agricultural practice and what it can look like. And it's been really enlightening for them to be able to see that and get the hands and just hands-on experience. Well, yeah, for us, being able to continue to have that rest assurance that we are doing well with what we're growing to the best of our knowledge and mitigating all the risks that we possibly can. So it's definitely a journey. That's the neat thing with a food safety document. It's a living document. So we're constantly reassessing, seeing how we continue to improve so that we're mitigating all the potential risks that might be helping in our area. Whether it's adding more PMs out there to extract birds or continuing to try to prevent any birds from getting into our or over our growing systems. Or the neighbor dogs keep on getting out. We put up a fence. So little things like that should try to prevent any potential problems. So definitely a journey, one of which we continue to listen and learn. And that's, I think, the biggest thing about it is working together and continue to watch out for potential risks so that we can do our best to do things good and healthy that we want to achieve.
Man, very cool. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that you're taking us along this journey with you.
Sure.
So next up, and we'll have time for a bunch of Q&A with Nathan at the end. So Nathan, if you'll, perfect. Kim, are you ready to give it another try with Trisha sharing the screen?
Yes, Trisha, if you have it, let's do it.
Oh, and Nathan, I should say you got a lovely compliment on those greens. You're a really good farmer and an amazing photographer. Things were looking really beautiful on that farm.
I thank you. It's definitely a lot of work during the winter, but we're having fun.
He does a great job. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Butz, and I am the South Carolina Local Produce Safety Coordinator for Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. And this is my story of the farming aspect and how I got into Harmonized GAP certification. So in the winter of 2015, I walked onto this farm that you're looking at, and I was going to manage this 90 acres in rural PA, 35 of which we grew on seasonally. There were 3 high tunnels, 3 greenhouses, 2 pole barns. We had a crew at the height of the season of 15 amazing and diverse people. We had a farm dog, Max. We did 500 plus CSA members, and I think at our peak we were almost at 600. We supplied 2 large farmers markets, and I was tasked with getting the farm Harmonized GAP certified. I had 8 months to get it done. At that point, I didn't even know what GAP was, thankfully, it's something that we were successful at. and the opportunity that I was given actually presented to get me where I am today. Next slide. So this was our nursery. This is where we started everything. Everything that we did, we started from seed. We would begin in early February, typically when there was still snow on the ground. We had it heated with propane and a heated concrete slab, and we set up our traceability process from seed through harvest. Next slide. Early spring hardening. This is, we grew several successions and we had so many different produce varieties. We started when the last frost was over, hopefully, by hardening and getting ready for the massive transfer to the fields. And then our, succession planning, that was really the key to be able to sustain such a large CSA, our 2 markets, and our wholesale supply, and basically supply the entire system throughout the entire growing period. Next slide, please. So almost year-round greenhouse growing, we were pretty fortunate in that, we would plant in very early spring and harvest right up to before Christmas. And many years we would be able to actually overwinter greens like spinach and kale and Swiss chard. Next slide. You name it, we grew it. We had a lot of diverse commodities that we sold, and we were pretty well known for our diversity in products. Next slide. We even grew fresh flowers and offered them at our farmers markets, and we had a flower share in our CSA box, so as soon as they started rolling in, the bouquets would get made. This really increased our offerings and some serious extra cash. Next slide. This was our Packhouse, and this is where we made it happen. We processed literally thousands of pounds of fresh produce throughout this Packhouse per week. Next slide. This was us, Team CSA. We pumped out close to 600 boxes of produce a week for that membership. We harvested on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we would pack and deliver all of those boxes. We offered choice boxes and incorporated a ton of value-added products from local artisans and neighboring farms. Next slide. Wholesale. This is where we really kind of opened up, and this was the reason for Harmonized GAP certification. So we were working with Common Market in Philadelphia, and they loved our produce. We couldn't supply enough. As they were growing, they were requiring that as assurance for safety to their customers, that they wanted everybody that they dealt with to be Harmonized GAP certified. So regardless of your size or regardless how much they liked you, they set that hard deadline, and we needed to do that certification. So we were all in, at times a little bit grumbly about it, but it opened many doors for us, including getting our products into Baldor, which is one of the biggest distributors on the East Coast, and into several of our local Whole Foods. Next slide, please. Writing the food safety plan. So I had written lots of plans for lots of other things, but not food safety for a farm, and I had no idea what HGAP was, so this was a huge task. I started the research and actually used the Penn State template and materials to write our plan. I chose to go right into Harmonized GAP. I was told that Harmonized GAP was ultimately going to be the standard, so I figured that I was going to start with the hardest and just get it over with first and foremost. I know it would have been easier in the short term to just go with GAP GIP, but in the long run, then I would have had to have changed it. So I used Penn State and the USD website, their HGAP standards and checklists, and I set off to get the farm audit ready and write that food safety plan. Next slide. Some of the items that we purchased, the shed, dosatron system, some of the Sanitate, shelving, clipboards, and I'll run through it, just some basic stuff. But I think the largest and the best investment that we made was that shed. It was, believe it or not, it was a place where employees got out of, the hot, the cold, the rain. We found some salvaged lockers and put that in there so they could do their personal gear, their work gear. We hung hooks, we equipped it with tables and microwaves and a coffee maker. a heater. And this is where, you know, I started to get help with the bigger task, and that was the buy-in to food safety. I wanted to show them that they were super important to the farm and that we appreciated their efforts. And this is, you know, this is where they could go. This was their own. And that shed pretty much changed everything. They were happy for it. They appreciated it. And, you know, the buy-in from that point was pretty easy. Next slide. So our sanitation system, you know, we use sustainable practice and we grew a lot of leafy greens and we had hard well water. So we went with the Sanitate 5.0 and a dosatron system. We didn't have to then worry about the pH. We just set that dosatron to the setting we needed it. We would fill our wash tubs, and then at the end of the day, we would clean and sanitize the entire pack house. We also used it for our harvest bins, and it saved us so much time and so much money. Next slide, please. So we used, this is actually inside the pack house. We used red hose, blue hose system where blue was potable and red was pre-mixed sanitizers. We used tough guard hoses so they could withstand the daily abuse. And then we used the DRAM touch and flow so those could just hang. And then we had flow on demand as we needed it, had a little bit of pressure to be able to blast stuff off, clean our bins, and everything was overhead, so it worked really nicely. Next slide. You know, general organizing, we kept clipboards with all of our logs, placed them, you know, basically wherever the task was taking place, made it real easy. We bought a ton of shelves to get things up off the floor and organized. And, you know, we put our signage in places where it was going to be applicable. That took a little while for everyone to get used to, but, and getting everybody into the habit of putting things back, but signage and placement really helped. Next slide. Porta-johns and hand washing, we didn't have facilities on the farm, so we had to bring these in. So we had one staple throughout the entire year, but then as our crew ramped up, we would ramp up those porta-johns. We had 3 in total, 2 in the main area and then 1 in the farthest field. And that, you know, allowed us, like, as production ramped up, we ramped them up, and as it ramped down, we ramped them down. Helped us save on some costs. Next slide. Pest control, we were pretty big, so we contracted all of our services. It was easier for the scale of our operation. And then once the pest control was kind of under control, when I got there, it wasn't. They came once a month, and the receipt was our record. Next slide. Audit day, you know, we had worked really hard. Everyone was on board. We were ready to go. We had the plan, the training, you know, the records. The farm was absolutely immaculate. That audit took almost 5 hours. And she went through every piece of paperwork. She looked at our harvest practices. She watched our watch and our pack. She interviewed our employees, and ultimately she gave us her stamp of approval. It was a huge accomplishment, and everybody was really, really happy and proud. So you could see that pride in everyone. Next slide, please. The inspector, it's kind of funny, was so impressed with the farm and our food safety plan that she started telling everyone in her territory that she was inspecting if they weren't quite where they needed to be, that they had to contact me and I would help them. I had no idea she had done that. But anyway, the phone started ringing. We were a member of PASA. They had heard about what was going on. They reached out, as well as the PA Department of Ag. And we hosted a few workshops on the farm where farmers came and they got to learn about HGAP, the certification process. They got to walk the farm, ask questions, and see our practices in play. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges of certification, you know, just figuring out how to write that food safety plan to be successful, creating good risk assessments, shifting some of the things on our farm so that, you know, we weren't doing any type of cross contamination, just getting the employee buy-in and getting them trained, and then putting all the systems in place to be successful in, you know, the growing, the harvesting, packing, and transport of our product. And I think the hardest part was just breaking old habits. Next slide. Lessons learned, you know, when the auditor tells you there'll be an unannounced compliance visit, you have to believe that they're telling you the truth. And you have to know, first rule of Harmonized GAP certification is there's no dogs allowed in the Packhouse. So quick story, eating lunch in the Packhouse the one afternoon, you know, everybody's back off to the field, and, you know, my pack crew was in the Packhouse getting things wrapped up for the day. Heard a car pull in, sitting there, didn't think much of it. You know, a few minutes had passed, and all of a sudden I got a tap on my door, and I had a window, and I looked up to see the PA Department of Ag standing outside my office door, and she was doing this. I was like, what is she doing? Oh my gosh, the auditor's here. And sure enough, when she went to open the door, she had to step over Max, who was laying inside the pack house in a nice cool puddle of water because it was exceptionally hot out that day. So thankfully she liked us, and thankfully, you know, Max was relocated to my office and then relocated to home. So believe me, when they say they're coming unannounced, they actually do. Next slide, please. This is not GAP certified, but it is fun, and we did have a bunch of fun on the farm. So I hope I've shown you what is possible, and that it is possible, and that there are many valuable resources out there to help you get started. And just know that you know, getting HGAP certified is not as bad as you think, and it can be done, and the rewards are absolutely worth it. Last slide. Thank you.
Kim, thank you. Great presentation. In particular, I loved seeing the photo of you from years ago.
Oh my gosh,
that long
isn't it?
flowing hair. And
I was gonna say the hair was a little longer.
I was worried that a picture of the dog was not going to make it into the presentation, and I'm really glad that it did.
That is Max, for sure.
Man, very cool. And so we'll have plenty of time for questions for Kim at the end. And Roberto Meza from Colorado is our final speaker. And he won't be using a PowerPoint. So if you're new-ish to Zoom, if you want to just get the full Roberto experience, you can go up to View and click on Speaker View, and he should be able to fill your screen. So Roberto, can you hear me? And are you ready?
Thank you, Billy. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Nathan and Kim, for sharing your story and enlightening the conversation. I really appreciate that. In lieu of a PowerPoint, I am going to put in our website that you can kind of peruse at your own leisure. But as Billy said, my name is Roberto Meza. I am a farmer here in Bennett, Colorado, about 15 minutes east of Denver International Airport. We operate on 35 acres, though we're really focused on our controlled environment greenhouse and our controlled environment shipping container mushroom farm. And so that's kind of where most of our time is spent. And we're now looking, how to provide opportunities for other folks to help us farm the rest of our acreage. My story really begins in a small 200 square foot greenhouse in Broomfield, Colorado. While my business partner and I were trying to figure out how to start on this massive 35 acre plot of land, we had all of these ideas for permaculture and regenerative ag and didn't know how to even begin. So while we were putting together our plan and figuring out what the market was like here in Colorado, both he and I are from Ohio. So we were just starting to survey the landscape of local food and figure out where our niche was. And I got really impatient and just wanted to farm. So I started growing microgreens for myself in the small greenhouse attached to a rental in Broomfield. And that really gave me an opportunity to satisfy my urge to start growing, but it also gave me a chance to begin offering the product at a time when no one really knew what microgreens were except for chefs. And I found that to be a huge problem because, we have a commitment to our communities, to food access, to food justice, and got a chance to experience firsthand the inconsistencies of our local food system. And so I realized that if I started small started building relationships, started to navigate the local food matrix, that I would eventually have a good understanding of how everything worked. Along the whole time, I was terrified that the health department was going to classify us as sprout manufacturers, which, you know, in their eyes, that's a manufacturing process. Sprouts are not considered raw agricultural commodities. And so we were so afraid that we started growing microgreens with that fear in mind that motivated us to understand food safety in the first place, because we wanted to make sure that we had an answer in case we were placed in a compromising situation with the health department. And so we just started looking online for as much information as possible to kind of educate people that sprouts and microgreens were two totally different products. Even though they're small plants, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same inputs, the same growing practices, or the same growing conditions. And so I came across a statement by the FDA that actually clarified the distinction between sprouts and microgreens. And when one of the health department representatives asked me at the farmer's market, hey, where's your license? I showed him that statement, and he didn't know what to do with it. He was like, I'm gonna have to shut you down, and where's your documentation? And so this really kind of spearheaded an entire conversation with local health departments, the Colorado Department of Ag, to understand, you know, this new product that was emerging in the local food system. And so we were right in the middle of it and just trying to cover as much of our bases as possible. But it was a really good kind of first encounter with the health department and produce safety in understanding kind of what we were doing in that space, growing microgreens. So we actually started out just kind of getting our feet wet in that first encounter with the health department. But that set the stage for ourselves in creating a culture of food safety, which for us was essentially the core values that we really focused on to support the protocols, the procedures, the methods that eventually would constitute our food safety plan. And we realized without having a culture of food safety and the values, it was much harder for people to like follow and implement the protocols. So, you know, we trained our team and now our staff that's here based on the values of that story. You know, we basically were like, hey, this is how we started. This is why it's important. And it was a lot easier for them to understand, you know, the purpose of food safety. Now, having had that experience, I understand that food safety is a way for smaller farmers to access new markets. So it's a democratizing tool to promote viability for your farm. And when I started to think about it in that way, you know, food safety started to become something tangible, and GAP certification became just another tool for us to promote viability. And so that essentially was the main kind of context for us seeking our certification. What that did was really demystify the process. I think everybody hears food safety, GAP, and kind of like freaks out because we don't really understand what that entails. We don't really know, you know, the interactions that are actually going to take place within the audit. We're scared to death of failing. We're scared to death of getting shut down. But those are motivating forces. Those are, you know, the apprehension that we can use in a way that can actually get us to follow certain protocols and achieve our objective of certification. So last year in March, about a few hours before we found out that the US had shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic, our auditor was here. And he came from the Four Corners Group GAP initiative and was facilitated by our food co-op that allowed us to actually gain access to the auditor and begin the process. As I mentioned prior to that, we had been building preliminary plans that eventually became the ultimate kind of binder that we were working off of for that first audit. So that was our first internal audit with the Group GAP initiative. And we were one of the kind of first smaller scale farms, the first microgreen farm that was certified under that program. And it was such a joy. I'm not really understating that. It was amazing to find confirmation from the auditor of the protocols that we were actually implementing. And that just kind of gave us a really good boost in that, you know, that we were actually doing this not purely to pass the GAP, but just to solidify our commitment to food safety and to providing a pipeline for training other staff members and team members for how to follow the protocols of food safety if they were working here. And that is just a really good way for us to see the many benefits and uses of food safety that are not just certification based, but also just helping with the training and onboarding of new staff. And so we passed the first internal audit, and it was just great. I mean, I think that, you know, the establishing a culture of food safety also turned us into nerds of food safety, where we were really just talking amongst each other, like, hey, you know, I think this is a spot of cross-contamination. We need to address that. Or, you know, we need to actually switch over to using stainless steel tables and make sure that there's no, you know, questionable materials in the space, in our packing house, etc. And luckily for us, we were actually using a shipping container, insulated, that was used to transport food as our pack house. So it made it so much easier for us to implement those protocols. And, you know, that was a good way for us to understand that a lot of the food safety emphasis, at least for our farm, was on harvest and post-harvest and food handling and transportation. And less emphasis was actually placed on the growing of it. But, you know, our approach was essentially using hydroponic processes, even though we weren't using nutrients or any kind of soil amendments or anything for our microgreens. So that was just a really good way for us to demonstrate food safety and production, and then also kind of figuring out what the relationship between kind of greenhouse production and then transferring to the pack house was like. And I noticed that was the critical element. Before we were actually taking our trays from the greenhouse to the shipping container to pack them, and realized that kind of intermediary transitional space also opened us up to possible moments of contamination. So we switched our protocols to harvest in the greenhouse into big bulk bins before we took them out to the packing facility to put them into our packages. And we just started to really understand food safety also in terms of improving our processes and streamlining the workflow and becoming a leaner farm in how we navigate our production process. And so that was a really wonderful opportunity for us to see that the auditor, as much as he was here to grade our procedures, was also giving us just little insights into how to continually improve. And what we saw was there's no limit for how much you can actually improve your food safety protocols.
Roberto.
Yes.
Billy, I'm going to, man, you keep saying all these inspiring things.
Yeah.
There's no good place. But I think I really want to pause there on there's no place to stop improving, and open it up for Q&A.
Sure. Sure.
But we'll keep you on the hot seat for a second. Kim,
absolutely.
Since you're a farmer now, produce safety educator, I'm going to surprise you and let you have the first question.
Okay.
If you already know Nathan, Kim, do you have a question or a comment for Roberto about what he was sharing? And then we'll go to the Q&A question box.
You're putting me on the spot, Billy. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're the best.
Well, I guess, well, one of my, when you said that you use the shipping container as your pack house, that's really interesting. So tell me about that. Like, how,
Yeah. Well, so we don't have the infrastructure really to accommodate a lot of these things, and the quickest way for us to get a space that was easily cleanable, that drained, that didn't have potential for standing water, was to use these shipping containers, these post-consumer dinosaurs that are all over the place. And so we got one that was insulated, that was previously used to transport produce across the sea, and now it's our permanent kind of pack house. It's a 40-foot insulated shipping container with stainless steel walls, and so everything in there is stainless steel, and it just makes it a breeze to go in and out. We actually cut it in half, or segmented it in half, so that one is our kitchen, the other side is our walk-in.
so then you have, I was just gonna say, so you have storage and refrigeration and you have water in there. Nice.
Exactly.
I love it. Mobile pack houses. That's a new, that
Yes.
could be a new thing.
Yes, yeah. It's a good way to bootstrap
Repurpose.
production and also falling in line with the food safety protocols.
Nice job.
I,
Thanks for
I do
sharing.
want to mention that really right now what we're looking into is digital food safe, like digitizing our food safety, so that employees don't get to clock out if they don't follow through and sign all of the logs. And that just adds another layer of accountability and traceability that allows us to also pull it up when an auditor is here. We don't have to leaf through the binder or anything. We just pull up the log, and it just makes the time a lot faster and the certification itself a lot cheaper.
Great.
Very cool. And Nathan, I have two questions for you. One is, what type of GAP audit did you get? USDA, Harmonized, and then what type of records do you keep, paper or electronic?
We ended up getting the Harmonized GAP, and we do a combination of electronic and paper. Paper for any of the sign-in information, like if we have a guest coming on the farm or our employees clocking in, clocking out, just for traceability there. But electronic, that is pertaining to our inventory. Like anything that leaves the farm, we have electronic tag that we know exactly where it was harvested from and where it is going. That way we have that one step forward. And then for the step back, we have a log that is paper pertaining to what field it was harvested from.
Great, thank you. And the next question is from Lisa. It's a question for the group. Have any of you worked with buyers who agreed to purchase from you while you were working on your GAP certification? So kind of a conditional purchasing based on meeting a certain minimum requirements. For example, you have a farm food safety plan and you're working towards GAP.
Yeah, when we were in just getting started in wholesale, we had a few of the smaller buyers who knew we were working towards our GAP certification and were absolutely willing to work with us. And then once we had received certification, I mean, that was just kind of the icing on the cake. And even working with a lot of farms, in South Carolina, North Carolina, there are smaller buyers that are absolutely willing to work with you until you get that certification. And then there are some that are not willing until you actually have the certification. So from my experience.
Yeah, I could also chime in there. One of the wonderful things that COVID really encouraged us to do was actually aggregate from other farmers and get food to people, and working with local organizations. And right now we actually just launched our food hub in the Denver area to aid in those efforts. And we are looking at ways that we can input or implement QMS or quality management system protocols, so that the buyers can see that even if a farm doesn't have their certification, they are working to it, and just allowing that software to establish the transparency and the trust is enough for them to actually understand that there's a commitment there, even if the certification is not quite there yet.
And for ourselves, it's pretty well been the areas we've been wanting to expand to is primarily to institutions or larger corporations, and most of them have required the GAP certification prior to us selling to them.
Very cool. Thank you. I appreciate especially knowing that there are options and that focus on trust and transparency. Teresa has a question for the group. They'd like to know more about your approved supplier program and record keeping. So I should probably ask, does everybody have an approved supplier program? Okay, good. I see some. Very cool.
Yeah. So, hi, Billy. I'll just speak up real quick. So,
yeah, thank you.
I transition a lot of farms from GAP to Harmonized GAP. And that's one step that they tend to, it's new. So the approved supplier program is a piece of a harmonized program that they've never had before. So I was just kind of curious how you guys manage that new piece and if you have any tips that you learned.
I guess I can speak from, from both sides of that. So yeah, when I'm working with any farm on getting their food safety plan together, I make the approved supplier part of the record, whether they're doing post-harvest or not. Now the new standard that's coming out is going to require that even in just the harmonized GAP, field harvest and or post it's going to be required. So Nathan can attest to this. I made him do it. You list every one of your suppliers, regardless of who they are and what you get from that supplier, have some contact information. And then if you're working with, like for your packaging or any type of packaging where your product is going to come in direct contact with food contact, direct contact with your product, then I put them through a vetting process where you reach out to that distributor and get that certificate that says, hey, we're a reputable company. Our products are food safe, and they're all very familiar. Any of the large packaging companies and even the smaller ones now are on board. They are more than happy to supply that certification to you. And it's basically just, getting that back from them, attaching it to your plan, and that gives you kind of peace of mind. So I did it at our farm as well. Answer the question?
Very cool. Thank you. We have another question from Chess. Roberto and others using digital record keeping systems. Are you using any particular app or program for your digital record keeping?
Yeah, that's something we're researching right now. We just realized that, so we had 3 audits last year. We had our internal audit, we had our unannounced, and then we had the Colorado Department of Agriculture audit. And, so it was kind of intense, but we realized that we were just spending too much time just leafing through paper. And that was what gave us this idea that, like, we just need to digitize it so we can show it and move on and not waste the auditor's time leafing through what we need to get to him. So that's that. We have a list of different, usually my partner is the one who's looking at that, but we do want to try and find one. And if we do find one, I'd love to share it with you and kind of share my feedback as well.
And for ourselves, we have been using Google Docs, the spreadsheet there. A lot of the forms are easily to transition to that particular format. And that way I can access it on my phone. So let's say I'm putting in a minute down in the field. I can input it right as it's going on. That gives me the timestamp I need and then the application rate as well. So it's been working out fairly well. And for security, I just keep it in a private database. That way that there's no chance of it being hacked into any other sources.
Yeah, there's quite a few platforms out there, like Ag Squared, and there's quite a few, and there's quite a few that do actually both, the record keeping portion of it. Some actually assist in like your organic certification record keeping, as well as your GAP certification and food safety. So there's a bunch out there. I can throw a few into the chat box that I'm familiar with. I'm very familiar with Ag Squared.
Very cool. Thanks, y'all. And so we've got time for one or two more questions. And I see some names in the boxes. And I know that y'all are very chatty people. So don't hesitate to put a question in. But while we wait, Kim, Roberto, Nathan, if I've got a grower and they're just like, produce safety freaks me out. So not even worrying about audits. What is just one benefit you saw happen at your farm? And even if you're repeating something from earlier, but what's one way that these produce safety practices did help make your farm life better?
Since I'm talkative, I'll just keep going. The organization and then the organization piece where things just kind of fell into place, and then the path of flow just kept right on going, and the camaraderie with like the whole team. I mean, I can't stress it enough that when we finished that audit, it was like, you know, everybody was popping up out of everywhere, you know, wanting to know if we were successful, and just the sense of pride, you know, for all the work that we had put into it. Because I can tell you that when I first started out there, you know, it needed some help, and you know, they were in some pretty bad habits. So just to see that transformation, I mean, that was the best part of implementing the entire program.
I definitely agree with the organizational tidbit. For an organized environment, it's so much easier to keep neat and tidy, and it just makes working so much more fun. Whether it's in the pack shed or out in the field, it's the environment. It's amazing how much that can do, just as with working with a team, could just really project how much you can achieve in a day.
Yeah, definitely. Ditto on the organizational and streamlining of your production flow at the farm. I think for us too, the other thing is just, you know, the peace of mind that if something were to happen, you can trace it back. So this is like a second level of insurance that, you know, really protects you, which is huge for small scale farmers.
Very cool. Thanks, y'all. Well, I think we'll just kind of start taking the final steps to wrap things up. So I'm going to give you all a hand of applause. If you're on Zoom, there's a digital hand of applause, but I very much want to say thank you to Kim, Roberto, Nathan. Tricia, if you have links to their operations and want to pop them back in the chat box. I also want to let you know that we have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks, Science Communication for Produce Safety Educators. Science communication is a new love of mine, and Kelly Vinyl from Story Collider, who tells stories through science. Bilal Sarari from the Young Farmers Coalition is going to talk about how he used storytelling in his farming, and I should warn you, he's maybe the most beautiful person I've ever met. So just prepare yourself to be wowed by how attractive he is. And Ben Chapman, also attractive, from NC State, will be talking about how he uses science communication in his produce safety education. And Tricia will put that link in there as well. Other than that, I just want to say thank you everyone for your time, for attending, your good questions. Kim, Roberto, Nathan, for feeding us and for just being so inspiring. So with that, look forward to seeing everybody soon. Bye, y'all.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you.
Oh, y'all, I forgot to tell you there's an evaluation link. Sorry, I'm terrible at the grant stuff. My team is going to talk to me about this later. There's an evaluation link if you want to click on it on the bottom, please, to help us do better. Okay, goodbye for real this time. Thank you.